All right, we are back with another Wavefront Media Business Series podcast. I'd like to keep it around personal development, wellness, business, and we just free flow. We keep it genuine. We keep it honest and transparent. Today I'm with Mark. What's your last name? Kondrat?
Kondrat.
Mark Kondrat.
Nice Polish last name for you.
Yeah, he's the owner at Explore 84, and that's the one that aligns a lot with what we're doing here at Wavefront Media. And then also owner at Alberta Beer Festival.
Yeah, that's right. Keeps me busy. You got to, if you're going to be in the beer industry, you have to be in the wellness industry too, just to kind of balance yourself out.
It's all about that balance, right?
That's right. Yeah.
I like to say work hard, play hard sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely, man.
I don't know if that's balance, but it creates some form of balance.
I don't even know if balance exists. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, a lot of successful mentors or people I listen to, like Grant Cardone, for example, you know, they all say balance is a myth.
Yeah.
You know,
I think it is if you think about it in the idea of 50-50. I mean, I think you're always going to be out of whack one way or the other.
Yeah.
You know, which is, I just think when you're pursuing things that are interesting, you're going to kind of go down a rabbit hole at the expense of other things in your life. And I think that's okay. Yeah.
You might say there might be moments. So like, I do agree in like overall balance, but there might be temporary phases where you have to sacrifice social, or you might have to sacrifice, I don't want to say it, sometimes you sacrifice diet a bit because you're working so long.
Yeah,
right.
Totally.
But it's not like, you always notice though, for long periods of time, skipping out on something, it's not sustainable, right? Well, at some point it'll come back to bite you.
Oh, 100%. And yeah, so and I think then there's be a difference between having your balance out of whack, for short amounts of time as you're pursuing something, but then also neglecting things, I think, is different. So you don't have to be perfectly balanced all the time, but you should be mindful of things all the time. Yeah, if that makes sense.
No, for sure. Something that's worked for me, I don't know if it's the best approach, but it's always worked for me, is that, so there's like kind of different pillars of things you can do to be successful, right? You can be reading a lot,
right?
Addressing the mind. Yeah. Right. Addressing the body, addressing the spirit. Right. So, I usually try to always be making sure one is killing it.
Yeah.
Right. So like and even within the body, that can be broken down into diet and then fitness.
Totally.
Right. Yeah. Like right now, currently diet's a bit off. Right. But I've been very consistent with showing up in the gym in the morning. Right. So I can feel good about that, with the end goal of really just being productive and feeling energetic and happy, right? So that's kind of how I approach it sometimes. It's hard 100%. To hit all of them. It's hard to hit all of them.
It is, yeah. And that was my biggest thing, you know, for years, you know, when we were building Alberta Beer Festivals, was it's very project-based. And so I would get really narrow focused on, you know, I want to get through this project because I love what I do for a living. And it would be at the expense of, like you said, mind, body, soul. So you kind of come out of this fog at the end of a festival going, holy shit, that was awesome, but I'm a wreck, you know what I mean? And so that was always my focus, was how do I, you know, I knew eventually that wasn't really a sustainable model for me. I couldn't continue to just kind of be that narrow-minded when I was involved in a project. So to me, it was, how do I still put that focus in, but at the same time still addressing kind of those mind, body, soul things that are important to you know, ultimately sustain your life, sustain your relationships, that sort of thing.
Yeah. It's funny. I don't know. Is it just me, or is it people that pursue business that tend to, you're forced to have to figure out how your body operates to be as productive as possible? Is that just me? It's something I've noticed, or why does everyone I know that, or most people running a business, they tend to have to take care of the personal development, well-being a bit more?
My opinion of that would, or my thought on that is that, I think we learn the hard way. You know, if you're going to be an entrepreneur, you usually realize that you need boundaries, because when you're just kind of running, you know, on all cylinders and in all directions, you do inevitably burn out, and you're kind of hitting your walls a little bit and kind of seeing, okay, what can I sustain in this direction, and and so I think maybe we do become aware of our bodies and aware of our kind of mental health and stuff like that, because you eventually realize that if you're not addressing those things, you're not going to be able to be a successful entrepreneur for very long. And so part of being successful or attempting to be successful is to pursue what you enjoy doing in business while taking care of yourself.
Yeah.
Because if you're a shell of a human being, you're not doing you're not doing any good for your business and for your, like I said, for your relationships, whether that's your coworkers, your partners, your spouse, your children, whatever. So,
yeah. And I guess as an entrepreneur as well, since really you have all responsibility, right? Mm-hmm. If you don't find those boundaries, you just fail, right? Like you're just going to fail, or you're going to have to, I find you learn fast.
Yeah.
You have to learn fast. Whereas like, I used to work at a corporate career, and you can kind of just coast a bit. You coast and let other people make decisions, make that, that salary income.
Yeah.
But you had responsibility for the job.
Yeah.
You could kind of coast with that a bit.
Well, I think what it is, when I think about it corporately, certainly I know a lot of people that work their asses off corporately, but there's kind of boundaries set up for you in a way. Mm. And whereas being an entrepreneur, there are no boundaries per se. And so you have to create your own boundaries, because because and it's probably cliche at this point, but lack of boundaries isn't freedom, right? And so it's when you have your own structure and you understand kind of the rules of the game that you've created for yourself, then you can create freedom within that, if that makes sense. But I mean, I don't know, being a wild person and just doing whatever the hell you feel like at any given time, that's not sustainable.
Yeah. And actually that makes
sense. And we've all probably tried to see if it is sustainable. And, so I don't know. I found that it isn't for myself anyway.
For sure. That kind of makes me think that, chaos isn't freedom, right? So, having pure openness and choice and all this stuff, that's not necessarily freedom. That's just kind of chaos a bit versus control.
Yeah. Right? Well, I mean, you can see
like a controlled chaos you have to balance or something.
Yeah, totally. I mean, you can see it in kids. Like kids that are just running around with no boundaries are annoying, right? And then just but kids who have some degree of boundary, and then can be creative within those boundaries are really interesting human beings, So I don't think we're any different than that.
Yeah, for sure. So talk to me a little bit about what do you do at Alberta Beer Festival, and then I want to hear a bit about what you do at Explore 84. Just a quick summary overview of each one.
Sure. So Alberta Beer Festivals has evolved into, we do 5 festivals every year. So 3 mountain festivals, Banff Craft Beer Festival, that is coming up in November, Jasper Beer and Spirits Festival, and then the Revy Craft Beer Festival. Then we do the Edmonton Craft Beer Festival and the Calgary International Beer Festival. So it really evolved from, we started in Calgary. And so me and my initial business partner, who I'm still in business with, we started just kind of throwing things at a wall and seeing what would stick years ago. So over 20 years ago, did a couple events and festivals and stuff like that. We used to do some at the Devonian Gardens downtown. We did one called Festivus, which if you're a Seinfeld fan, Festivus for the rest of us. And someone approached us one day to say, hey, there's no beer festivals in Calgary. Why don't you start a beer festival? And I had worked for Molson when I was a student at University of Alberta. And so I really liked the beer industry. And so when we started the Calgary International Beer Festival, that was just kind of the people that we gravitated towards, the people that we enjoyed, the people in the beer world, the spirits world, hospitality in general, restaurants, chefs, people like that. We loved working with them, and we loved kind of helping to share their stories. And so from once we started the Calgary International Beer Festival, we really wanted to just kind of keep in that trajectory. So a few years later, we started Edmonton. It was actually probably 10 years later. Everything seems like it was just, whatever, a couple of weeks ago. But, and then from there, the Mountain Series. So, really what we wanted to do outside of Calgary and Edmonton was we wanted our festivals to reflect the lifestyle of a lot of the people in the industry and just, share their stories in places that we love being. So we love being in the mountains. And I think, beer is a big part of that kind of lifestyle. So yeah, that's why we landed on those 5 and keeps us busy. So a lot of fun.
Yeah, that's cool. That's awesome. When you say sharing their story, that means essentially hosting the event and allowing them to show up. And
yeah, 100%. So, the biggest thing that we try to do through our festivals is we don't really tell people, what their space is going to look like, we want them to come to us and tell us what their space is going to look like. When you're at a sampling event, the food or the beer or the spirit that you're sampling, to me, that's only 50% of the story, or maybe not even 50%. I think you're there to meet the people behind the brands and to get a sense of what they're all about. So if you've ever been to the Calgary International Beer Festival, you'll have seen what Cold Garden does, for example. And, you get a real sense of who Cold Garden is once you get to go there and kind of hang out. So to me, that's what it's about. It's just kind of a canvas for them to share their story and connect with consumers in a way that's meaningful.
Yeah, no, that's cool. I've been to the beer fest. I don't think I've seen Cold Garden's booth, but we go out there quite often, like every other month.
Yeah.
Usually I'll have friends that want to go to Cold Garden.
Yeah. No, and it's a great example of a local business that is, they're just authentic, and it really is obvious. And so, yeah, like I said, we don't at our festivals, it would be really weird for us to tell, Dan and Blake and everybody there, what they're going to be doing. You just kind of give them the empty canvas and see what the hell they come up with.
Yeah, and they'll surprise you every time. Yeah.
Yeah, they will. And my job in that sense is just making sure that it's approved by Alberta Health and AGLC and Fire and all that sort of stuff. Yeah, I make sure it's legal. They come up with the crazy ideas.
Yeah, there's an example of controlling the chaos a bit.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Okay, so now Explore 84. Now this is the one, when you were referred to me through our contact Jordy Quaz there. Mm-hmm. He shared Explore 84, and this was one that resonated with me right away because just your slogan, their journey to your highest self.
Yeah.
Right. So something about that, like, for me, like when I can really boil down what my journey, like going through the business entrepreneurial world is about, it's like, I've been put in a position where I'm forced to always be discovering my best self and trying to discover what is my highest potential. I'm pushing myself to these limits in different ways.
Right.
So when I see Journey to Your Highest Self, it's very interesting to me. It resonates a lot. So talk to me about what you're doing at Explore 84.
Sure. So there's kind of the way that it came about was, I guess, partly obviously from me and then partly from Greg Long, my partner in Explore 84. So from where it came from my perspective is, again, going back to, running these festivals. So Alberta Beer Festivals, we started doing this when I was, when we were younger, obviously. And so as they evolved and as I was getting older, I realized, it had to be done in a way that was sustainable for myself. And so I wanted to make sure that I was taking care of myself. And to your point, in those 3 areas, so mind, body, and soul, just so that like literally I was healthy enough to bring my best kind of version of myself to my business every day. And then, along the way, I got married, I had kids, and it's not fair to, those relationships to burn yourself out at work and come home and be a shell of a human being, right? And so I knew that I had to do something in my life to just kind of address those issues. It actually started out just physically, and I find that for me, fitness is something that I've always enjoyed. I am by no means an expert in fitness, but being active is something that I always enjoyed. But then, having said that, during festivals, as festivals would become closer, I would just be like, "Okay, I don't have time for this shit. I have to focus on this." And then there would be like this inevitably like 3 or 4 week kind of window of I haven't done anything. I haven't went for a run. I haven't been to the gym. And so then you have to kind of wake yourself up after the festival's done and kind of reestablish a routine of, okay, now I got to go to the gym and I got to go for a run today. And I realized to myself, like, one of these days I'm going to say, fuck it. And I'm not going to want to do that. And that would really suck. And so what I decided to do was, okay, well, what can I do every day that's kind of baseline, that's minimum, that's going to at least allow me to address what I need to do to be physically active. Because doing the festivals, you need to be physically fit to do a lot of that stuff. There's a lot of walking, there's a lot of carrying kegs, there's a lot of stuff that you're being asked to do. But then also like I said, as I get older, it's like, okay, well, I want to be physically active for my kids. I want to be, and so that was something that I would do, is I would just check off, yeah, I did my run today, or I did my bike ride or whatever. And then it doesn't take long before you realize, okay, cool, but you need to address other parts of your life, which are, let's say, your mind, right? For me, what I found is I stopped being curious, and I think once you stop being curious in life, you stop enjoying life to a large degree. And so I wanted to force myself to kind of re-engage and be curious again. And so, I challenged myself to read every day. So I read a lot of autobiographies and business books, and I'll throw in the odd nonfiction here and there, but it kind of helps me, think about new ideas. And it's the reason that I started my podcast to begin with was, let's learn how to ask people questions again. It gets hard, and as you get older, to ask people questions. I always I say when I was a kid, I felt like, not that it was overtly said to me, but it was almost implied smart people know the answers and dumb people ask the questions. So you almost get scared of asking questions. And so I went years I would have, good friends around me that ultimately I almost knew nothing about, because I was scared to ask them questions. So anyway, so I wanted to incorporate, challenging myself through my being more mindful. And then inevitably, you realize that spiritually you're kind of like that, not doing anything to address that sort of aspect of yourself. So then I'm like, oh shit, okay, I got to start doing something in that regard. So for me, it was meditation and just, getting a little bit of time to myself every day to just, really just relax and just kind of, gather my thoughts and just, make sure that I can find out how to, find peace when needed, right? Because life is chaotic. So that's where it came from for me. And I was just doing it purely selfishly, and the fact that I was tracking all of those things. So am I doing these things mind, body, and soul? So it'd be, let's say, a run every day, 5 minutes of meditation, something minimal. 5 minutes sometimes would end up being 20 minutes, but let's start with something easy. So I'd do 5, and then 5 minutes of reading, which would end up being, again, maybe, oh shit, that was a good chapter, I'll read another one. So, and then where Dr. Greg Long got involved. So a friend of mine, he was looking at it from the perspective of how can he help his clients. And so him being a chiropractor, he'll get people coming into his clinic and saying, oh, my neck hurts, but I don't know why. And for him, his clinic's called Proactive Health. So his philosophy has always been, let's be proactive about our health as opposed to reactive. He would much rather see people live healthy lives than come in and get fixed when they're broken, right? So for him, what he wanted was some sort of tool that he could give to his clients, that they could kind of track what they're doing, so that it's like, okay, your neck hurts because you're not going to the gym. Your legs are this because you're not mobile enough. So, he wanted something that could help them track their progress in an easy way. So when we kind of merged the two ideas, we came up with Explore84, which is, we're building an app which will be available right away. And just an easy way to just check off, I did this, so that you can be mindful of just doing small things on a daily basis to kind of keep yourself at a reasonable level, that you don't fall off on any of those three areas.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that, there's something, I don't know, very useful about that for people. I know for myself, I've had to put in so much time and effort in exploring this myself to find kind of those pillars, the important things to focus on in this, right? I think it's very useful for people to actually have that provided to them when, a professional and someone like you who's done it, like found wellness through just kind of being forced into it.
Yeah.
Not everyone, there's entrepreneurs that don't discover that stuff. There's people that do not discover this stuff, whether they're not interested in or just haven't been lucky enough to see the power in it.
Right. The biggest thing for me with that, but one of the things that I guess I was struggling with, and again, part of why we wanted to create this was, you read books and there's so many interesting ideas in the books, or you talk to people and they inspire you, but it's really hard to implement those things, incorporate them into your life, right? And so for me, what the app is it's just a platform, or it's a system to say, okay, here's the things that I want to do, and then you can track them easily. So many times people wait until, they've hit rock bottom, or there's a health emergency or something, and then suddenly they have an epiphany and they're like, oh shit, I got to do this. And, we are capable of having those epiphanies before we have a terminal disease, or before, a relationship runs its course, or what have you. So to me, it's just like, okay, well, how can we proactively address these issues, right? It's going to make you a better, it's going to make you feel better. So it'll make you by default a better, coworker, a better husband, hopefully, still working on that, and a better father.
Yeah. And that's the thing with books. Like, the interesting thing with books is, like, and I've noticed this with myself, is, you can read the book, you can go through it, and you can be like amped up in the moment and going through it. I've had to actually put effort into turning it into an action plan. Like, for myself, I had to like, what am I going to take out of this? Right.
Right. Yeah.
I learned the power of, actually, instead of reading 100 books, if you find a book that really resonates, read that one 100 times. Right.
Right.
And just keep going through that one and take as much as you can out of that. Right.
Yeah.
So there's some books that, very influential books on me. Like, one is Power Now. I wanted to bring that up because we're talking about spiritual stuff. I was curious if that one's been beneficial for you for, like, finding that peace. But that is one where I almost think it took me about a year to get through it, but I would apply it at work every day. So I would read a paragraph, and it was such a abstract idea for me at the time. I was like, I know there's something important here. I'm not seeing it yet, but I can see what it is. I'm going to read this paragraph or this page and see if I can try to apply it at work. So I went through it once. Probably took me a full year where I was like studying the book. Yeah. But I could see there's so many layers to it. And then I keep going through that. Then I'd listen to podcasts with him, and then I'd listen to him with Oprah, where Oprah's questioning him on the different sections of the book.
And what's the author?
Eckhart Tolle.
Okay, yeah, that's what I thought. Okay, I wanted to make sure I was thinking of the right book. Okay, cool.
It's this one right here on your list.
Okay, yeah, and that's one I would agree with that. I would like to. I'm in this rereading kind of like phase right now. That's one I'll have to read again, because you're right. Some of those concepts in there are they're abstract in a way, right? So it's kind of like, okay, I get what you're saying, but how do I apply that to my life? That's always the challenge.
Yeah, exactly. And that's kind of with like I've been noticing with books. So, like, anytime I go in a phase where I'm like heavily hitting books, I find I do, like, my life just exponentially grows. Yeah. Right. But all of those, there's sometimes so many concepts thrown at you at once. Yeah. And then they all start falling off eventually.
Yeah, like it's amazing how bad our memories are. You know what I mean? Because you're so inspired by something, and then like literally 5 minutes later, you can be like, "Oh shit, what was I so inspired by?" Like we're way dumber than we give ourselves credit for. And so yeah, I think that's why writing notes when you read a book and rereading them is so important. There's that one book, The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck.
Yeah, and
I reread that, and it took me like halfway through the book before I realized that I was rereading it. I'm like, how did I not like? And so like, it's amazing. We think of our brains as being these like amazing recording devices, and they're really not, or at least mine isn't. And so, yeah, I always have to, I think it's important to reread that. That's a really good idea. But then make notes on what you're doing so that you can kind of go back and kind of revisit what was important. It's neat. When you read a book, do you highlight?
So it's funny. I was just thinking about that, and I have just started doing that. Mm-hmm. I've throughout the summer, I've been off of reading. Going into the summer, I was reading a lot, and I was always worried about, I don't want to highlight these books up. I was like, no one's looking at them. Yeah. This is for you, right? Yeah. What I noticed was just the action of, like, you're almost more, you're more intentionally in the book when you're thinking about, you're going to be highlighting the important things.
Yeah.
Right. So then just the action of highlighting it, I feel almost like, engraves it into you a little bit deeper just by the action of highlighting. So yeah, before summer, I would say the 3 months before summer, I was started to do that with books, started to highlight the parts.
Yeah.
And what I noticed was, even without, having to reread it, almost like journaling, which I do that a lot too, but just the action of like writing something down or making that the cognition, the thought to go and do that action. There's something powerful about just doing that.
Yeah. And then what's cool, I think, next time you read that, then use a different color highlighter, because what's neat is when you revisit a book, like in different phases of your life, you pick out different things, right? Which I think is really neat. I've just reread The Top 5 Regrets of the Dying, which is not as uplifting as you think it is. No, sort of obviously a depressing sounding book, but what I love about that book in particular is it's one of those things. So, okay, this woman, she was working with people who were effectively like, they're on their deathbed. They know they're dying. So she got to have conversations with them about obviously what they regretted in their life, what they should have done, what they shouldn't have done. And so if you think about that book, it's very interesting that we can read that while we're healthy, knock on wood, and we can see, okay, if these people who are dying, so collectively, let's say she took care of 100 people, these were the themes that continued to come up that people regretted. So when I reread it, I thought, okay, well, why don't I reverse engineer that? And so then what you can do is you can take from those stories, what are habits that you can create to make sure that you don't have those regrets when you're dying, right? Because so much of it is avoidable if you are thoughtful about it, right? And so that's what I like to do with books, is I like to try to see if I can take away something specific, because, I would read these books, they would be inspirational to me, but then like a month later, I'm like, I almost forgot completely what the book was about. So I like to highlight, but I like to, I'll write down quotes as much as I can. Like I said, in certain books, like let's reverse engineer it so that there's like specific takeaways that I can then apply into my life on a daily basis.
Yeah.
Because if I'm sitting there on my deathbed and I have one of those regrets, it's like, dude, you knew 30, 40 years ago how you had the tools to avoid it. You just chose not to, right? So I feel like we have the tools to avoid these things. It's just up to us to implement them or not implement them.
I'm going to have to read that book, because that's taking like, I don't know how old these people are when they're dying, but it's taking like 80 years of experience, packing it into a lesson, but it's like finding the overlap between how different people, what they all think. And it's like, that's a very powerful thing to get right there.
And it's powerful, but you also have to think these people were lucky enough to have a deathbed, if that makes sense, because most people just die. And so you don't get an opportunity to, make good on things. You're just here 1 second and then you're not here the next second. And so, I think it's important to work on those things throughout your life so that you're not, looked at like a complete asshole when you die. And especially to the people that are important to you, like to me, it's important to be a good dad. And so I want my kids to know through what I do, not just through what I say, that I love them. I would hate if I died and they weren't sure if I loved them or not. That's an easy regret to kind of get over if you can. And what's funny is some people have a hard time telling their kids they love them, which I find is super sad.
Some ego involved there. I'm going to have to, AJ, the guy you met up there, he has this, he's creating this service called Digital Lifecast. I'll get you guys to chat about this after us, exactly on this topic, but it's something he's addressing in his thing. Now, another thing that I thought to bring up again was, so while reading through these books, you're highlighting stuff, and you were talking about how to turn that into some form of action, right? And this brings me to, and I think I've seen you talk about this on your website, but habit, right? So for me, life equals habit plus goals, right? So for me, like you're saying, we're dumber than we think, right? However, we're a species of habit though. Like once I started understanding the power of habit, right? And, sometimes you don't have to remember stuff, but if you can just get that one book and take the key elements you like out of it and keep practicing it for months, 3 months, it almost just like through habit just becomes part of your routine. Yeah,
totally. And that's the biggest thing. Like, so Explore 84 it's 84 days, which is 12 weeks, which is about how long it takes you to kind of ingrain a habit, right? So, if you can do simple things on a daily basis for 84 days, for example, it's really hard for me not to run on day 85. Like I run every day and or it's really hard for me not to pick up a book, just cause it's a habit. Right. And so for me, we all have habits. Just, do you have good habits or bad habits? And none of us are perfect, right? So, but I think, when you look at it, and this is obviously simplistic, but it helps me, as we've addressed, I need simple things to help me. But life equals habits plus goals is, if someone would say, yeah, but I don't really have any habit, like I don't consciously have habits and I don't really set goals, well, you can kind of work backwards and imagine probably what their life is like. So for better or for worse, I think that your life is a combination of your habits and your goals. And so if you can be thoughtful of what your habits are and thoughtful of what your goals are, then you're probably living a fairly meaningful life. And if you're not putting any thought into that, you're probably living, kind of the path of least resistance. And so you probably have spurts of happiness, but probably lacking a little bit of meaning. That would just be my kind of guess. And that's kind of the way I look at it. But then, there's the other balance is you got to enjoy life. Like, it's not like, so what is happiness to people? It's not, being physically fit isn't the end all be all. There's a lot of people with six packs out there, I'm sure, that are miserable bastards. So it's finding that like balance of, how does going for beers with friends kind of fit into that equation? Because I don't want to live a life where I can't go out and eat wings and watch football with my friends, or, go for a nice meal with my family. So, finding those things that are important outside of just, reducing it to, oh, if you can't run a marathon, then, what's the point of living? You know what I mean? So, yeah,
for sure. But at the same time, and that's why it's like balance is so key, but taking the path of least resistance, and I forget the exact quote, but that almost is the hardest thing you can do. Like, I've heard some good quotes on this topic, and I've realized this for myself, but sometimes taking the path of least resistance, that ends a lot of times you end up living a hard life just because life is just hard, right? And you're not in control of it, but you're getting beaten down by the economy and working a poor job because you're taking the path of least resistance.
Right.
Might have been Grant Cardone that said this, but the hardest thing you can do is doing nothing.
Yeah.
Because you still have to deal with all the pressures of life regardless. Right. So, but if you're actually pushing headfirst into it, sure, you're pushing yourself through, some chaos and some stress, but at least you're in a better position where you actually build some skill sets. You have some confidence and, there's not ever like the most perfect approach, but there's probably a balance between two. But if I had to pick path of least or go in and stress the shit out of yourself, I'd pick this one.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. I think the path of least resistance then would just mean you would live in chaos constantly, right? And it's also too like, how much do you want to react to the world and how much do you want to kind of create your own world? And I think, for me, like I know there's tons of things out there that I can't control. So, okay, whatever. But I also know that there's a lot of things that are within my control. This morning I didn't want to go for a run. Like I really didn't want to go for a run this morning. But I knew that I had to. And so there's little things that, that we can control. And then if we can kind of embrace those things and then take on the world from that perspective, then at least we feel like we have some sort of, I don't know if the word's agency or something, right? Somehow we're at least affecting the story of our lives in a positive way.
Yeah. Instead of, like sometimes you'd naturally think just trying to take it easy and be comfortable would be the easiest thing.
Mm-hmm. But
it turns out it's almost, I've learned that it's the exact opposite of that.
Well, yeah, like you think about that. Like if you were retired, like what people talk about when they imagine retirement. I'm always curious, like, well, how long could you actually do that for? Like, I get that you like golf, but can you really golf every day? Like, maybe you can, and that's really cool. But I would think that would be the minority of people, right? And so, I think I don't know. I think. I don't know, and everybody's different. I don't want to judge anybody, but for me, being proactive on a daily basis and just not going to the path of least resistance is important for me.
Yeah, and just through my experience, like I push the message of like, obviously balance, but it's almost easier to push for like, let's go and let's figure something out versus this, just because I explored both myself through my personal experience. Yeah. Found one that absolutely did not work. Yeah. To kind of depression and, why me? Like, the government, all this stuff, right? Everyone, why me? Why is life so hard? Like once you end up in that mindset, it's almost like game over for you. You have to get out of that real fast because everything sucks. Yeah. That's the hardest place to be in, at least in my experience.
Yeah. And everyone gets like that. Everyone is like a, boo-hoo, woe is me every now and again. So, you just got to kind of snap yourself out of it. And then, you could go down the rabbit hole of like, what kind of, do you really want to be in that victim mentality? I think that's kind of a dangerous world to live in. You want to feel like you're in control of your own kind of being. So, and that's all part of it. I mean, like I said, having those shitty days and failing and all that stuff is all part of the process, right? It's all kind of figuring out the walls of kind of the arena that you're playing in. So it's okay to have a shitty day and be whiny and mopey, but get up the next day and whatever, take shit on. And it's okay to fail too. Like I've failed. I've had lots of conversations about failure. Like if I was to look at my career as an entrepreneur, it's probably, 80% failure. So, failing is fine too.
Yeah. And I've learned the exact same thing. Like, I've found some of my most powerful lessons through some of the biggest failures, right? But it's how you having the right mindset going into the failure, or at least learning how to respond to the failure.
Right.
Right. If you can respond to the failures properly, don't be scared of losing.
Yeah.
Right? Sometimes you get a sharp, real fast lesson that way.
Yeah.
Right? You get a very decisive lesson if you're actually open to looking for it and not being scared of it and being embarrassed about failing.
Yeah.
I've noticed that definitely for myself through my own experience.
I would agree. And we live in a world where, I don't know, it's hard to fail. It sucks. We live in a world that glorifies success, as I think you should actually celebrate people's successes. But it sucks when you kind of got to go out into the world knowing that you just did something that was less than awesome. But yeah, that's just the way it is. One of the things, and I'd be curious to see what your thoughts are on this, but maybe through failure, you learn a little bit about yourself, and you learn a little bit about maybe what you're not good at. But you learn to, I guess what I would say is, by not being afraid to fail, you're allowing yourself to express yourself truly. And so one of the things that I found helpful was with podcasting, because it allows you to think ideas, to articulate ideas that you're thinking about, and to kind of find your voice, which I think really being an entrepreneur is all about. It's about trying to articulate a vision, right? So podcasting is kind of forcing you to articulate your thoughts. And podcasting is no different than, a business, in that you're going to have good podcasts, you're going to have really shitty podcasts. Yeah. And you just get up and you prepare the next day. And so, I would just say that, whether you're doing, trying to create habits, whether you're building a business, you don't want to bake failure into it and almost romanticize failure, because you should try to avoid failure if you can. But it's okay to fail, and don't actually. So one of the books that I read, and I was just talking to the guy, Duff Gibson. He is a local guy. He wrote a book called The Tao of Sport, and talking about elite athletes and even just kids playing soccer, let's say. When winning is such a focus, people avoid losing, which seems obvious. But what that means is you don't put yourself in situations where you could potentially fail, which means you're not growing, right? And so in everything that we do, whether it's sports, whether it's business, we need to allow ourselves the opportunity to fail so that we know that we're pushing ourselves, right? And failing doesn't equal being a loser, but sometimes you feel like a loser.
Yeah. I always try to always find the honest, raw truth about topics, right? So there's a book called Ask and It's Given, which is kind of allowed me to kind of think about this topic, but there's this emotional spectrum, right? There's really bad depression. There's really good, right? But it's a teaching of just learn that they're all there and they're all equally important, right? Sometimes we put labels on one or the other. Bad is bad, good is good. Now, the way I see it now is that there's good and bad. And actually, if you didn't have bad, you wouldn't know what good is.
Right.
So it's actually, they're there and they exist, and almost judge them less. Right. They almost take good less seriously and bad less seriously, and just enjoy it, and almost just try to listen to the bad, enjoy the good, but don't over romanticize the good or over build that up. Just understand that this is here to make this, right? Yeah. And it's the same with failure and winning, is that if you're trying to avoid this, well, then you're going to probably be avoiding as much potential as you can get on this end. Yeah. Almost just embrace the failure. It's there. It's good for you. You need the failures for the wins. They both all exist in this ecosystem together naturally. Totally.
And try not to fail the same way twice.
Yes.
Be unique in your failures. That's is that a Buddhist saying? There is no, I'm butchering it obviously, but there is no good or bad. Thinking makes it so. So the universe doesn't really necessarily give a shit about, it's just kind of doing what it does. And so I think we give ourselves way too much credit for being, important in the big scheme of things. So that should give you a lot of freedom to fuck up, because ultimately the universe doesn't care if you succeed or fail. But yeah, there is no good or there is no bad per se. And when what we think of as bad, when we look back at it, will oftentimes be the biggest blessing that we could have had, right? Like some of the failures that I've had allowed me to kind of reimagine the path. And so, I wouldn't be, if everything had been easy for me through business, I wouldn't put as much thought into the things that I do, and I wouldn't have challenged myself in the ways that I do. And quite honestly, like I wake up every morning excited, maybe less excited this morning to go for a run than normal days, but I'm genuinely excited for almost everything that I'm doing on a daily basis. And that's pretty good. That's kind of where I want my life to be. So
that's an awesome place to be, for sure. If you can just be excited about what you're doing every day. There's days I struggle with it. A lot of times I have to do a lot of things to make myself more excited.
Oh God,
cold shower. I need to go out, go out for a morning walk. Sometimes I'll meet with my friends in the morning, but I have to like stack things in my favor sometimes. So I have to be like, okay, I need this routine now that ensures I cannot have a bad day.
Yeah.
Right. Meeting with the friends in the morning, doing a workout, doing a steam room, cold shower, coffee, walking outside, like just stacking things up in your favor, just for a simple thing. I just want to be excited about what I'm doing.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, I like that. And hey, I said I wake up excited every day. I don't look forward to everything that I'm doing. Like I had a bunch of things on my to-do list that I had to do this morning that I'm heading to Jasper Thursday, and so I got a lot of shit that I got to do before I go to Jasper. And so part of me just wants to hide in a cave and not do any of it. So it's not that I'm like excited for everything, but even just the opportunity to have all these things going on, getting to come in and have a conversation over a podcast, all the things that are on my to-do list, are pretty cool in the grand scheme of things to me. And so, I don't really get stoked on all of them, but collectively, it's just like I feel very lucky to be where I'm at.
That makes me think of the power of just appreciation and gratefulness.
Yeah, gratitude is huge. That's maybe the next thing that I got to do is be more mindful of just that. Sometimes you get stuck in forgetting, not just how amazing life is, but who are the people around you that kind of allow that life to be good, right? Yep. You start taking for granted. And so, I think, and we talked about that a little bit ago, where it's just like some people have a hard time telling their kids that they love them. But also, too, it's in the same way. It's like they have a hard time saying that to their spouse, or they have a hard time telling people that they work with how much they appreciate them. And it's a weird thing, and I'm guilty of that in a lot of ways. Like I'm just like, why can't I just tell that person like that I think they're awesome, or that I think they're, they look good today, or something like that. Like it's just, and I find myself being physically incapable of doing it. I'm like, what the fuck's wrong with me, So I think, and if I was to create gratitude as a daily habit, it becomes easier the more you do it, right? And so by just, maybe sending out a text and saying, hey man, I'm just thinking of you. I hope you're having an awesome day. I'm grateful for everything that you did. The first time you text that, you're going to be like probably cold sweating, be like, Jesus, I feel like such an idiot. The second time it'll be easier, and it gets progressively easier, right? So gratitude, not something that I'm strong at expressing, but I think is an important.
And it's funny, you bring up, it's almost like a practice, right? So, Asking It's Given, Esler and Jerry Hicks, right? There's a chapter in there. I think it's the most powerful chapter I've ever read. And it's the topic of rampage of appreciation.
Okay.
Right? And just how...
Sounds intense.
how it just builds and builds and builds and builds and builds. And when you start digging in and looking for stuff to be grateful about, you get better and better at finding things to be grateful about.
100%.
And once that becomes a habit in your brain, then your life just flips.
Yeah.
Your life flips, because instead of looking at life like, oh my God, oh, why me? Why me? Why me? It's like you start looking at these small things. Like, for example, I woke up in a soft bed today. Isn't that awesome?
Yeah.
Wow, I've conditioned air.
Yeah.
Isn't that lucky?
Yeah.
How can I just go to my fridge and get food at the perfect temperature?
Yeah.
Or you start looking at things like that. Like,
oh yeah.
Right. And just your life changes completely when you start looking at stuff that way. 100%.
And yeah, especially, and that's, and layer on top of that we're reasonably healthy. And, it just like, it almost makes you, it's like anytime you find yourself being a ungrateful little bastard, it's like, you want to slap yourself, like we have so many good things happening. Like I have probably 4 different coffee makers. I have 4 different ways that I could make coffee in the morning. Like, I mean, that's so dumb, but it's awesome, right? Like, I mean, like, so right from the second that I wake up, there's like infinite, things for me to be grateful for. And then we still choose to be little, whatever, insert inappropriate word here. So, yeah.
And it's like you kind of mentioned earlier, it's like keeping this stuff in mind is great. You're never going to be perfect at it.
Yeah.
But at least it sets kind of that imperfect, chaotic journey.
Yeah.
Where it's like, every day you're not going to be perfect at it. Like
totally.
Today I was a bit less enthused about going into the day. It could have been lack of sleep. It could have been a lot of things, right? Sometimes you just, you're not going to be perfect, but keeping these things in mind will help make life so much easier.
And talking about them, I think, people in general sometimes I think have a hard time being authentic because we live in a world where we think we're supposed to be this way. And so actually learning how to be authentic and expressing yourself the way you want to express, I think is something that's really important. And that's something that you have to focus on daily. It's a muscle that you have to build. But then also allowing other people to do that too, right? Allowing people to evolve and be kind of their authentic selves and not who you need them to be, compartmentalize them. And so I think that's an important muscle to exercise on a daily basis too.
Yeah, for sure. I feel like we could keep talking about this stuff forever. There's one more, I want to get into kind of more business specific stuff. I'll have a few questions about your business, and then maybe we can wrap this thing up. I feel we could just keep on going. Now at Explore 84, what is your mission? Like, what's the vision with Explore 84? What are you trying to do with this?
I think the mission is, I guess I'll say a couple of things. One is, like I said, to create a platform or a system where people can kind of plug in what they would like to have for minimum daily habits and minimum weekly goals, just to kind of, be able to check in on themselves every day. And so this is really, for me, it's not about here's what you need to do every day, because everybody's different. So everybody has their own passions, their own things that they think about. So in the worlds, in the areas of mind, body, soul, everybody should select for themselves, what is it that they want to work on or maybe need to work on. And so for me, the idea is that physically the app becomes a platform where they can do that. And that's an individual kind of thing. And then collectively as a community, just support each other on each other's journeys, knowing that everybody's is different and everybody has a different entry point into their journey. Some people, they come at it from a spiritual perspective. For example, a friend of mine who was starting Explore 84, when he saw the soul aspect to him, he thought of music instantly. And he was like, oh, this will be a good reason, good excuse to start playing my guitar again every day, And so everybody has kind of a different entry point into, getting into Explore 84 and what habits they want to build and what goals they want to accomplish. But and it's not for me to tell people what their goals and their habits should be. But once they've set those, as a community, we can encourage each other and also celebrate each other's, victories and little milestones along the way. So I think the community component of Explore 84 is really important, and just allowing people to have a voice and be able to express themselves. And because so many people, they look at others, and Instagram is, an example of this, where you oftentimes just see the best of people, and then we compare ourselves day to day to the best version of that person. And it's not really fair to ourselves, right? And so, and having said that, if I'm strong at this thing over here, well, you're strong at this thing over there. So you can help me if I'm curious about getting into that, and I can help you if you're curious into getting into this. And so we can help each other as a community, and inspire each other. So it's do you remember the movie, do you ever watch the claymation version of Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer?
Okay, yeah.
So I always thought it was funny when they're both running away because they want to be independent, and they say, let's be independent together. And that's really what it's all about, is like, how can we have our independent journeys, but do it collectively, right? That's an important thing for me. I like my alone time. I like whether it's running by myself, reading by myself, whatever. But I also like to have a forum where I can bounce ideas off of people, and I think that's helpful.
Yeah, nice, awesome. Yeah. Essentially, creating a platform to it's community based, but also giving people tools to make life as easy as possible.
Totally. Like, I've never understood, like, people will say, you got to wake up at 5 o'clock. And I wake up at 5 o'clock and I answer my emails and I do all this shit, and like, I'm crushing it, and you should do the same thing. And I'm like, no, I don't really want to. I'll wake up at 5 o'clock, but I want to just like read a book and drink a coffee and then maybe go for a run. So everybody is different with why they do things. And just because I do things in a certain way doesn't mean that's the way. It's just my way. And so you're going to have things that you do, and you're going to do things in a different way. We can learn from each other, and maybe certain things that you do are going to resonate with me, and vice versa. But I don't think that there's a universal, like if Explore 84 was, here's what I do on a daily basis, now just replicate this and be as amazing as me. Like, I'd be like, give me a freaking break. So it's really about personal journeys, and then supporting each other in those. And that's where the saying, a journey to your higher self is just be a better version of yourself, and learn how to articulate yourself, your own voice. I mean, that's how you're going to make the biggest contribution in the world, right? And so if we can encourage each other to be the best version of themselves, they're the best versions of themselves, and then we all benefit as a community. So
yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. When you were making this, did you have in mind, like, this is going to be great for this type of person? Like, do you have like an ideal customer? Or do you have an idea of who that person is? Or?
Well, initially the ideal person was me because I needed it for my own survival. And so really the way I look at it, I hate saying it's for this person, because hopefully anyone that can find it useful will use it. But certainly entrepreneurs and people who work in areas where they don't have these defined boundaries, right? If you have, a lot of people find working, corporate jobs or you say union type jobs, helpful, because you kind of have this like predefined boundaries of what your expectations are, when you need to go into the office, when you are allowed to leave, and when you can have lunch and stuff like that. A lot of people like that structure. And then a lot of people don't. But the problem with being an entrepreneur is, because you don't have that structure, you effectively start out with no structure. And then, like we talked about before, you realize quickly that you do need some sort of structure, or else your life is going to be fucked. And so you're either going to fail as an entrepreneur and give up, or you're going to I don't know, but it doesn't end good, however that ends. And so you have to figure out a way to kind of provide structure for yourself. And so when I think about it like that, I think, okay, well, who's going through a phase in their lives where they are going from maybe a structured set of circumstances to kind of a more of a chaotic space. So students, like I have a nephew who just went to university. When you go to university for the first time, it's total chaos because teachers suddenly don't give a shit. Not only do they not care if you don't show up, they actually statistically need half of you to fail because the rooms that you're in next year aren't as big as these rooms. They need you guys to drop out, right? So to succeed as a student, you need to be disciplined and create your own structure. So I would say that would be a perfect kind of target market. And then the other one that I see is retired people. Because like we talked about that, right? Suddenly you're going from a world that you knew, a world that had boundaries, and now you think, oh, I'm going to golf every day, or I'm going to drink margaritas or whatever on the beach. And after a week, you're like, oh, it turns out I don't really like margaritas as much as I thought I did. And, golfing with Johnny every day is a real pain in the ass. And so you're kind of left in the fuck, what am I going to do now? And so this allows you that structure. And then finally, I would say one of the things that I was inspired by is a couple of my friends who sadly had terminal diseases. And with talking to them, just the idea of, their daily habits were so important to them, their daily walks, taking their medication. So they had to learn how to live a very structured daily life. So habits were important to them. And then goals were important to them too, because it can get really frustrating when you're on a journey, whether it's you're dealing with cancer or degenerative disease, and you can lose hope. And so what goals do is they give you hope. And so it's like, okay, I'm doing this every day. I'm walking every day, taking my medication every day, because I want to go on that ski trip. And that my goal is to go skiing with my friends in 2 months. So I do this every day and I get to look forward to that. And then that goal comes and then it's like, okay, I'm going to go, camping with my family. So I need to do these every day so that I can accomplish that goal. So those are the people that I think can benefit from it. But I mean, yeah. That was a long-winded answer, but I think about that all the time. Like, who specifically could use it? So
yeah, so those are some pretty. Yeah, there's probably many use cases, right? We have students.
Yeah,
we have entrepreneurs. To me, I'm thinking likely more that are in a corporate setting, trying to transition out into entrepreneur, because they're leaving this area of boundaries to no boundaries.
Yeah,
right? And that's almost it's people that are going from boundaries to no boundaries. That could be one avatar there, right?
Yeah.
Who else? You had retirees.
Yeah.
And
actually, I talked to a lot of people in the restaurant industry because I feel like, being a chef, there's an opportunity in the restaurant industry to live an unhealthy life. I've been lucky enough to meet a lot of chefs who are amazing. My friend Michael Allemeyer, he is a master chef, which I had to Google what that meant because I thought maybe it just meant that he won a competition on the Food Network. But he actually, so a master chef, compare it more to like a master electrician, or he's a master at what he does. When he became a master chef, he was only the third chef in Canada to be given that designation. But he is just this ball of energy. And so he actually is doing the Explore 84 journey with me right now. And I was asking him, like, because you see some chefs, they leave the kitchen and they just look like a puddle and they just want to go home and put their feet up and have a beer, smoke a joint, whatever it is that they do to escape. And then they do that all over again the next day, So I asked him, like, how did he, because he's, I think, in his late 50s. I'm like, how do you maintain your energy? Like, you have more energy than a 20-year-old chef. Like, you're a psycho. But he approaches it like a pro athlete. He said, like, when he had to do all of his courses to become a master chef, he approached it like he was a pro athlete. So creating those habits were so important for him in order to achieve the goal of becoming a master chef. So yeah, there's just, there's so many people that I think can benefit from being thoughtful of what can they do on a daily basis to have those positive habits.
Yeah. So it actually makes me think on that note, then it's like, even if you're, you don't have to be an entrepreneur. If you want to just do the best as like in your corporate job, if that's what you love doing, you love the job you're doing, this might be something to give you a framework to just excel at that as well. And
be 100%. Because so many people, they take everything that they do in life and they do that first. And then if there's any time left over at the end of the day, they take care of themselves. But like 99.9% of the time, if that's what you do, there's magically never any time to take care of yourself at the end of the day. To me, I flip it around. Like, I take care of myself first thing in the morning, because then I'm bringing that energy to these conversations. I'm bringing this energy to the office. So I'm focusing on myself first and my own personal habits and my own personal goals. And people, we're trained, we're conditioned to believe that that's somehow selfish, but I don't think it's selfish at all. Yeah. I think it should be encouraged. I think people should, number one, take care of themselves.
Absolutely. 100% agree. Well, hey, I think that's we're at about an hour now, so
nice.
We could keep going, but hey man, I love what you're doing. It's awesome. I love the conversation. That's about it. Unless you have anything else to add.
No, I think I rambled on enough. Awesome. Thanks, man.
Good stuff, man.
Yeah.
Awesome.